Good afternoon. I'm Anuj Mehrotra. I'm the Dean of the George Washington University School of Business, and it is my pleasure to welcome you to this episode in the George Talks Business series. And I am also delighted to welcome our guest today, Mr. Sandeep Dadlani, who is the Chief Digital Officer for the Mars Incorporation. And Sandeep, welcome to the show.
Dean Mehrotra, such a pleasure to be here with you and to partner with the George Washington University. Your reputation, both yours and your institution's reputation, is legendary. So it's a pleasure for me to be with you.
Thank you for your kind words, Sandeep. And, I would, of course, love to talk about Mars and your role at Mars. But before we do that, I would request you to walk us back and talk a little bit about your background, perhaps your educational background, and your early career and how you ended up at Mars.
Thank you, Dean. I was born in India, in Bombay, and I grew up in a middle-class setup. I did my engineering and my MBA in finance, and I joined an investment bank, Citibank. After a few years in Citibank, I realized that the money was really in software and the emerging technology industry in India. So I joined Infosys, which was at that time a $300 million fast emerging IT powerhouse. I spent 17 years in Infosys, all in the US, in a variety of roles, until 2017, when I was president and running about a third of the company. And at that time, Mars came along. So Mars is only my third job. But Mars really wanted to undertake a fantastic digital transformation. The values of Mars, the private ownership, the principles and the purpose really appealed to me. So for the last 3 years, I have been helping Mars drive a once-in-a-lifetime transformation. And I'm so excited to culminate my journey so far with Mars.
So that's great, and I'm certainly going to want to hear about that as well. But you have been clearly associated with some very big global brands, and all three of them, as you point out, are the big names there. So before we go and talk a little bit more about the digital transformation that you referred to, can you tell us a little bit about Mars itself as a company? Of course, ever since I was a child, every time anybody talked to me about Mars, all I could think about was candy. But Mars is a lot more than candy. So could you tell us a little bit about all the products, some of the products and services, and perhaps give us an overview of the size of Mars Corporation?
Sure. So you're right. Mars is well known for legendary brands like Snickers and M&Ms, and who didn't enjoy them growing up? I did as well. But what I've found is actually Mars is almost a $40 billion conglomerate, all owned by the Mars family, so it's privately held. Our largest business is pet care, which is an ecosystem of not just pet food and pet nutrition, but also vet hospitals. We are the largest sort of vet hospital player in the world. Fitbit devices for dogs like Whistle, genealogy for pets, Wisdom Health, and an entire ecosystem of products and services for pet care. Our second largest business is Mars Wrigley, which is the candy confectionery treats business that we have grown up with. And then we have a food business which has brands like Uncle Ben's and Tasty Bite and Dolmio sauces, and also personalized nutrition businesses. What is most appealing about Mars as an entity is a fierce growth ambition, but perhaps a fiercer ambition towards our purpose, which is building a better tomorrow for all of us, for all stakeholders. We live by our 5 principles, which were framed decades ago by our founders, and we apply those 5 principles of quality, responsibility, efficiency, mutuality, and freedom in almost everything that we do. So it's a high-principled company, a purpose-led company, and a very successful company as well. The culture of the company is extremely human. So our associates are literally family. We hug each other, it's a remarkable associate-driven culture to be landing into. And yes, we can call ourselves Martians, which is a very unique privilege as well.
Well, that's great, and that's great to hear. So, in all of this, where you're talking about, what is very people-centric company, tell us a little bit about your role as the chief digital officer, and how does that differ from being a CIO or a CTO, which is a more commonly designated, designation that's used in many companies.
So I am the first ever chief digital officer at Mars, and frankly, the idea that we framed along with the Mars leadership team and the board was not to drive a technology agenda per se or a data agenda per se, but to first frame a speed agenda, an agility agenda. You see, large companies, global companies like Mars, have great ideas, have very smart people, and can perhaps buy all the technology prowess from anywhere. Um, but the thing we lack sometimes is our speed of taking decisions, our speed of execution. That technology, data, and digital can be an enabler for that speed, can be an amplifier for that speed, would be a good idea. So we framed our journey as a 100x journey, which is whatever we want to do as a company, however we want to move towards our purpose, we will go faster, and not just 10% faster or 20% faster, 100 times faster. And the idea of going 100 times faster would be for every associate, not just the digital department, not just the technology department, but for all of our 125,000 associates. They're all unique. We work in 88 countries. We have so many passports and accents in every room that we enter. The diversity in this company of religion, of gender, of orientation is marvelous. But when each of these individuals, each of these Martians, when they put on their digital armor, then we hope that they maintain their bad hairstyle or their bad sense of humor, but they can really get things done much, much faster and amplify themselves. This framing of 100x then became the mandate, and hence the title. I mean, these titles will come and go, chief digital officer and whatnot, but the mandate for speed will remain.
So that's great to hear, Sandeep. You're talking about the Martians who are so much, you talked about hugging each other as a company. And of course, you are dispersed with a very interesting, set of very different backgrounds that everybody comes together in a company like that. This kind of a company must be having a lot of challenge in a time when we are separated from each other, when there is a pandemic going on. So could you talk a little bit about how that has impacted the Martians, so to speak, and how you are overcoming that challenge?
Of course, I mean, this pandemic, if you ignore the terrible human tragedy associated with it, the medical tragedy associated with it, and the economic consequences of this pandemic, it has actually been I dare to say, a godsend for a 100x journey. It has been an accelerator. You see, even before the pandemic, we had evolved a simple digital engine, which is the way to go digital for every associate was to find the problem with consumers in mind, the unstated, unmet needs of consumers, to solve it quickly using data, analytics, AI, technology. And then once we solve it, we scale the solution using automation, fast automation, so that we can free ourselves up as associates to find the next problem. You see, we believe that Martians, or for that matter, any corporation, even a venerable institution like yours, we are meant to find new problems and leave the solution and the scaling to machines. And because that is where the human mind can excel. So coming back to COVID, we've unlocked a series of more than 100 sprints across the company to understand new consumer needs and to pivot to them. As an illustration, a lot of our consumers could not access our products in stores because the stores were down. We had to make 14 plus direct to consumer launches where we could offer the products and ship the products directly to consumers. We had to pivot our vet hospital business to telemedicine. Vets usually are not very comfortable trying to see pets on a screen. Pets need to be held. need to be hugged, need to be sensed, need to be touched. But our brave vets, partnering with our digital teams, pivoted to telemedicine on mediums like these uh, in 48 hours. Our Pedigree brand launched a unique dog adoption campaign on Zoom so that consumers who wanted to adopt pets but did not feel safe enough to walk into a shelter or a breeder could look at their dogs, prospective dogs, on Zoom and adopt them and get a contactless dog delivery service, believe it or not. So about 100 sprints later, the investments we have made over the last 3 years have really manifested themselves beautifully in various ways. The Snickers gratitude campaign that we launched for frontline workers, the M&M's gratitude campaigns we launched for frontline workers also brought our purpose to life, that we are here as a credible, important member of society, making things better for tomorrow. Now, the big question in front of us is how do we maintain this speed and this empathy level, even after the pandemic? You see, the pandemic has unlocked a level of speed that we could only dream of. It has truly helped us go 100x.
So I really appreciate your attitude towards how you are doing this, of course, and I understand a lot of people. And when you mentioned AI and analytics, I have a few questions that have been submitted actually for you to be and I'll bring those up. But a lot of times people feel that AI is there to replace human, and you kind of said that the human mind is always going to be there to really define the problem, and it's the solution and the scaling that we kind of leave it to machines, which is what you were talking about. But tell us a little bit about how you are using AI and analytics. Give us an example of how perhaps you are engaging your consumer better because of that, or understanding your consumer better because of use of AI and analytics.
Dean Mehrotra, even prior to Mars, I had a lot of hands-on experience with solving AI problems and building AI companies in my past and consulting on AI. One learns from failure. And the one thing I had recognized is that AI for the sake of AI is horrible AI, to be honest. But AI for the sake of amplification of human potential, AI for the sake of a worthwhile purpose can be very powerful in general. At Mars, we were very clear from the beginning that we would take the associate or the consumer that we wanted to amplify at the center of our AI journey. So, for example, we employ some of the world's most radiologists, the highest number of pet radiologists in the world. And these pet radiologists are extremely busy, they have scarce time, their productivity is important for our diagnostics labs. They help detect some of the worst diseases in our pets early through x-rays and so on. Some estimates are that we process 30 million x-rays, dog x-rays a year. When our AI scientists used the user centricity techniques to observe these radiologists, they found something simple, that for the first 30 seconds to 1 minute, every radiologist just orients the X-ray right. Then for the next few minutes, they actually find trouble spots, which are likely to cause some other issues in the X-ray. And then for the next few minutes, they go on to detect serious diseases like cancer and so on. Well, AI could easily solve the first problem, orient the X-ray right. That's it. For thousands of radiologists, the first 1 minute was saved for every X-ray they looked at. When you multiply that across 30 million X-rays, that's huge in terms of productivity. The next thing that the AI could do is, by using certain neural networks, we could zero down on the big problems. And today, some of our AI algorithms are even doing mitotic counting, which is detection of the stage of cancer faster and more accurately than anything else. Our purpose for our pet care business is a better world for pets. What better way of leveraging AI than to amplify the radiologist, to make her more effective, and drive towards that purpose of a better world for pets? We have more than 200 AI projects running at Mars, So much so that AI is not a thing anymore. It is not a sexy thing to have AI as a project. It's always there, invisible. What is visible is the associate who is driving towards our purpose meaningfully. To us, this has been a more purposeful way of driving AI.
Well, thank you, Sandeep. And I think, as you said, AI for just the use of AI is not fun to use, but you are certainly clearly using it for the good of the world, so to speak. And I think there's a lot of discussion that we are exploring at the School of Business during our conversations, which are at the intersection of artificial intelligence and ethics as well. And I think there's a lot going on there. But let me switch a little bit and kind of dive a little bit deeper into the use of analytics. I know many of our students are actually working for Mars, and they are Martians themselves. And there are aspects of analytics that when we have taught some early classes we used to teach, we used to point out about how analytics was able to help us figure out that a young father, for example, when he went on to buy diapers, place the beer next to the diapers because he's going to reward himself for picking that up. And that linkage that was there between doing something which they felt was good and rewarding themselves helped sell more beer as well as more diapers for that reason. So there must be certain things like that you have discovered for Mars. And then I would really like to hear not just an intuitive explanation of something that you might have found, but perhaps something counterintuitive that human minds may not have been able to associate or explain what business analytics or analytics has found for you.
Absolutely. Dean Mehrotra, the way we have framed the purpose for our analytics group is to solve problems that we have framed for the consumer or the end user. So really, our data infrastructure has also been built to solve the problem with consumers. Our first step, therefore, is observing consumers deeply, meaningfully, to find unique ahas, counterintuitive items. As an illustration, in the pandemic, we found in China, people obviously wearing masks as China's economy recovered. But there were early signs within those consumers, conversations, social chatter, that gum would be an interesting item to chew on because you have bad breath underneath the masks. And that was counterintuitive for the gum category because the gum category thought, well, we are an impulse business. Now that people are not visiting airports and retail stores, no one will just pick up a pack of gum unless we start activating it as something to be used along with masks. That has driven phenomenal activation. Another one was around gamers. You see, video gamers, and the use of video games actually increased over the last 6 months, as you can imagine. We found that gamers love to chew gum again as they play video games. And there are certain gum products that we have that could add functional benefits to gamers. So these two are very simple examples of how gum activations could come about without even thinking about what it would have meant. And the analytics involved in it was massive. What are the drivers for those sales? What are the channels that the sales could run on? Right now, we are working on an interesting activation. So everyone is complaining that Halloween will not be the same this year because it may not be safe to go trick-or-treating as it usually was. So we tried to focus on that idea of consumers as to how would they like to celebrate Halloween. We brought our best data scientists and our best technologists to the party, and we have created what we think is a phenomenal experience, which is completely digital, virtual trick-or-treating, except that because of our consumer centricity, because of the analytics we have used, we have created an experience that could be perhaps even better than physical trick-or-treating or complement physical trick-or-treating. Now you can trick-or-treat your grandma in Florida and your friends in California, all virtually more than ever. So we are very excited about the new and amazing insights that we get every day by observing consumers very, very closely and then unleashing our analytics team. And I can tell you that the students actually from your esteemed university have played such a phenomenal role in helping us unlock this magic. I would recommend your students to anybody based on, and I would like to have most of them for myself, for Mars, but would recommend them for anyone who is willing to create an analytics infrastructure and an engine of their own.
Well, Sandeep, I'm really enjoying this conversation right now, as you can tell, and thank you for that plug there for the GW students. And I agree with you. I couldn't agree more with you. You mentioned about Halloween being, a very different experience, and you are creating that experience for folks. Of course, would love to hear a little bit more about that as well. But after Halloween, it's not very far away, and then there's going to be Christmas, and it's going to be a pandemic still at that time. Have you done any analytics, any artificial intelligence kind of projects there to figure out on how that might evolve and how that might work for the company at this point? Because I'm not so sure if Christmas would be the same this year. And it's a big one for Mars.
Exactly. So, Dean Mehrotra, what we are embarked on is simple. The best of AI can't predict how we will recover as a society in the future. But what we can do is break down the future into a series of scenarios and sprints. So currently we are on a 100 by 100 journey. You can see a pattern of this 100x story where we're coming out with an insight every week and activating against them. And we are saying that the next 100 weeks is not going to be normal. It's going to be a uncertain recovery of sorts. So what if we understand an insight every week and activate against it? And across the 100 activations, perhaps we fail half the times. Perhaps we have reasonable success for 30 of those. But for 10 or 20 of those, we create absolute blockbusters. Now that would be a good ratio to aim for. It needs a culture of failure, but a culture of speed as well. So for example, for Christmas, we are already detecting that consumers have had enough of 2020. And frankly, you and I have had enough of this 2020. We really want to celebrate early. We want to celebrate safely. We want to celebrate, perhaps even before the usual shopping periods and so on. The question now for all of us is, yes, we've gotten this insight. How might we activate against this insight? This is going to spread to Easter next year. And then, Thanksgiving and more. So we are now entering into a phase where we have to work in short-term sprints. Or as I like to call it, we have to work at 100 times the speed. That's all.
I think, you're absolutely right in terms of whether you call it 100 times or you talk about innovation through agility and a culture of failure. That's when you can fail if you're going to continue to try new ideas, and you can try them very fast and get the right one quickly. So I appreciate that very much. Let's talk a little bit. You mentioned about how diverse Mars is, and I think diversity and inclusion have obviously played a big role in successful corporations. I would like to take the opportunity for you as a leader to maybe talk a little bit more about diversity and inclusion at Mars and what it should be in the corporate America, for that matter, overall, intentionally, on how companies can go about making sure if Mars is doing it, how can others kind of emulate that?
I'll speak from personal experience. For me, joining Mars was itself a big education on inclusion and diversity. I thought of myself as a largely aware, inclusive, and leader overall. But the culture at Mars showed me what it really meant, not just to have everyone at the table, but to dance together on the table, to be inclusive and diverse in its true meaning and form. But the events of the last 6 months were, frankly, even more educational to us. It made us aware of our biases, sometimes unconscious biases. And I'm proud to say that Mars has come out very strongly, learning from these experiences. An example is one of our most powerful brands, Uncle Ben's, has just rebranded ourselves as Ben's Originals. Because where we listen to consumers and we listen to our associates, and while the brand is loved by hundreds and millions of people, there were certain connotations around the brand. And we were clear for our food business, it is important to have everybody at the dining table having dinner together. And for that, we changed the brand name to Ben's Originals, and we made the purpose of the brand focused on bringing everybody to the dinner table. Internally, we have set very strong goals for ourselves to improve our gender diversity, our racial diversity, our representation from countries of origin, and so on and so forth. All in all, I find the leadership team at Mars, the owners of Mars, to be genuinely and authentically committed to our goals of creating a future tomorrow that is truly inclusive and diverse. After all, hugging people of all colors, of all races, of all orientations is unlocking sheer joy, sheer smiles, which frankly all of us are here to do. So I'm really eagerly looking forward to our diversity journey and inclusivity journey in the future as well.
Very well said, Sandeep, and no wonder a lot of our students are attracted to work in your company there as a consequence of that culture. But let me ask you, for the benefit of my students and for the benefit of many others who may be looking for positions at Mars, it is not easy to assemble a winning team like this, right? So it's never easy. And I have asked this question of many of our guests who have been in leadership positions, and I'm going to ask you this question as well. And in the time remaining, I want to ask just one or two questions to make sure that I respect your time. But this is my question. What is it that you look for in terms of talent when you are looking to add more folks to your team?
It's a great question, Dean. One of the founders of Infosys is Mr. Narayan Murthy, who I worked with very, very closely in my time at Infosys. He is practically family to me, one of my best mentors. And he used to say early on to hire for learnability. You see, hiring for degrees sometimes becomes less important because degrees, as you know, become irrelevant over a period of time. Hiring for skills becomes more important because skills have to be kept permanent. And GW does a good job of continuing to refresh skills for a number of students. But then the ultimate skill is the ability to learn new skills all the time. And that would, frankly, unlock, especially in this fast-changing digital world, potential for an individual to go on and learn about supply chains today, but then learn about digital marketing tomorrow, and learn about AI day after, and so on and so forth. So I look for learnability, the ability of a person to keep switching domains and learning the heck out of it. That would then be a successful team.
Wow, I couldn't agree with you more on that, Sandeep. In fact, in higher education also, we are facing the same thing where the needs of the marketplace have been evolving and shifting very rapidly to a point where the half-life of higher education is less than 5 years, shelf life. So, I think one of the things that I like to say for universities, it has become important is to how to teach their students to learn how to learn. And that has shifted our, attitude towards what pedagogy is best. And of course, I'm not going to go into that details because I'm the one who is interviewing you today. But, that has really been something that has come to light, especially during the pandemic, as we have shifted almost completely and exclusively online. So I appreciate what you're saying there. Let me ask you one final question, and I think first of all, it's been just a pleasure talking to you about, and I love your attitude, but I would also love your advice for some of our students and alumni, especially as they navigate through the pandemic. Perhaps drawn from your own experiences or otherwise, on some words for them to look forward to as they navigate the pandemic and beyond, and what you expect the world to be.
Well, to the extent I have learned from failures and maybe some moderate successes, one of my mentors also taught me that the softest pillow is a clear conscience. This is super important to have that level of high integrity. That's table stakes for any other success you're going to have in the future. And then finally, listen carefully to consumers, to your stakeholders, to your partners, to your parents, to everybody around you. Because to listen is then to solve more magically than anybody else ever could. That would be, my learnings and my advice.
So thank you, Sandeep. That was great advice. In fact, I completely understand that it's very important to keep on learning and listening.
If I may interrupt, for all your audience and your listeners, I have a treat in store. You see, tomorrow, October 1st, we are about to launch our exclusive Treat Town app, both on the Apple App Store and the Google Store. So I would invite all your listeners, your audience, your students in America to download this app. The whole idea here is to celebrate Halloween together, to trick or treat each other across America, to buy candy and even to donate candy to charity in a meaningful way, in a purposeful way. You see, under our watch, Halloween will not be canceled, and we will celebrate Halloween together in its full tradition. So, if I may request your audience to download the app, it would be awesome. And we'll hopefully send you a video as well to show you what the app can do.
Oh, well, thank you, Sandeep. And if there are any Martians who are hearing it right now who can send us the video, we'll try and see if our producer can put it at the end once we end the show today. But I do want to thank you again, Sandeep, for a wonderful conversation. And I want to thank everybody else who has joined us today online. And of course, invite you to the next online session in the Josh Talks Business Series. Our next guest is Afsani Boschloss, founder and CEO of Rock Creek, who will be interviewed by Professor Danny Leipziger, Managing Director of the Growth Dialogue and Professor of International Business and International Affairs at George Washington School of Business. So I hope you will all join us then, and let's see if we can tee in the video that Sandeep just talked about. Thank you again.
At Mars, we believe the world we want tomorrow starts with how we do business today. And the Halloween of tomorrow starts with a world we'll unveil this fall. Introducing Treat Town. More tricks, more treats, more households than ever before. Treat Town will transform trick-or-treating into an interactive, inclusive, and child-safe month-long community experience. Drive adoption, conversion, and sales for Mars and our retailers. And create a dynamic platform to support future holidays, partnerships, and global expansion. Welcome to the ultimate Halloween adventure.